Hey, let's get one thing straight from the start. Being an empath isn't a weakness, it's your superpower. But, and here's the kicker, a superpower without boundaries is a liability. Now, if you've ever fallen for someone avoidant, you know exactly what I mean. They come in like a storm, charismatic, mysterious, intense. Then just when your heart is in it, poof, they pull away. You're left overanalyzing text, questioning your worth, and trying to fix the connection. But here's the good news. A true super empath isn't just deeply feeling, they're deeply aware. And awareness is how you outsmart the avoidant dynamic every single time. You see, the avoidant needs space to feel safe, but the super empath doesn't chase. They hold space without shrinking. The avoidant tests connection by withdrawing. The super empath doesn't beg, they observe. They know that silence isn't rejection, it's data. And most importantly, the avoidant keeps people at a distance out of fear. The super empath, they don't stick around to be chosen eventually. They choose themselves first. Let me say that again, louder for the people in the back. You don't heal by waiting for the avoidant to change. You heal by not making their confusion your identity. So how does the super empath win? They see the game and they stop playing it. So if everything seems so simple and they stop playing it, they meet inconsistency with clarity, they meet detachment with groundedness, and they meet every disappearing act with the phrase, "I'm not available for uncertainty masquerading as romance." The avoidant only holds power in the presence of your unhealed need to be enough for someone emotionally unavailable. But the super empath, they walk when connection costs their peace, because they know empathy without self-respect is not love. It's self-abandonment. So stop trying to decode the avoidant. Start standing in your worth, because that's how the super empath outsmarts the avoidant. Not with manipulation, not with games, but with boundaries, awareness, and the bold decision to not betray their own heart. Empathy is often misunderstood. People think it means being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. But real empathy, evolved empathy, doesn't mean losing yourself in other people's emotions. Empathy isn't reliving yourself in other people's emotion. It means you feel deeply, but you stay rooted. You care, but you don't collapse. That's what separates the super empath from someone who's simply emotionally raw. The super empath has boundaries. They don't just absorb energy, they process it, filter it, and choose what they do with it. This is where the dynamic with the avoidant gets interesting. The avoidant pulls away when intimacy deepens. It's not that they don't feel. Often they feel too much, and that overwhelms them. So they run, they retreat, they go cold. And what does the typical empath do? They rush in. They try harder. They over-explain, over-apologize, over-give. Why? Because they feel the emotional shift and they want to fix it, to restore harmony. It's instinctive. But here's the truth. That instinct, while well-meaning, often becomes a trap. The super empath doesn't fall for that. They recognize that feeling someone's discomfort doesn't mean they have to solve it. They can sense the tension in a moment and not leap into action. That's power. Because when you're deeply empathic and you have boundaries, you stop being easy to manipulate. You stop being reactive. You stop making other people's emotional withdrawal mean something about your worth. You no longer feel the need to prove you're lovable to someone who's emotionally unavailable. Instead, you stay, you listen, you observe, you wait to see what they do with their distance, not what you can do to fix it. This is empathy with self-respect. It doesn't rush to rescue. It doesn't audition. It doesn't beg. It feels everything, but doesn't get swept away. People often say, but if I stop reaching out, won't I lose them? Maybe, or maybe you'll stop losing yourself. Because real connection doesn't require you to abandon your center. The super empath knows this. They understand that boundaries don't make them cold, they make them clear. And clarity is rare in a world of emotional noise. It's what makes them magnetic. It's what makes them dangerous to avoidants who rely on confusion to stay in control. Empathy is only powerful when it's grounded. Without boundaries, it's not love, it's self-erasure. Awareness is what elevates the super empath from someone who simply feels to someone who sees. Most people move through relationships reacting to their emotions, letting anxiety, hope, fear, and longing dictate their every move. But the super empath does something different. They pause, they pay attention, they notice patterns, they ask, what's really happening here? Instead of just asking, how do I make this better? When someone avoidant begins pulling away, it triggers the empath's nervous system. The shift is subtle, a slightly delayed reply, less eye contact, a colder tone, but the super empath doesn't panic. They register the change without immediately personalizing it. They don't jump into overdrive trying to earn back warmth. Instead, they observe. They understand that not every change in mood is about them. And even if it is, they know it's not their job to fix someone else's fear of closeness. The power of awareness lies in that space between stimulus and response, that breath, that pause, that moment where the empath could reach out, chase, over-explain, but instead chooses stillness. From that stillness comes insight. The super empath realizes that distance isn't necessarily rejection. It's data. It's information about the other person's capacity, emotional availability, and level of safety in the connection. They don't take avoidance as a challenge to win someone over. They take it as a reflection to learn from. With this level of awareness, the empath starts seeing the difference between someone being complex and someone being unavailable. They start noticing when they're giving from a place of love versus when they're giving to manage someone else's discomfort. This discernment is everything, because once you're aware, you stop negotiating with red flags. You stop rationalizing behavior that clearly makes you feel small, confused, or chronically uncertain. You don't need to make it make sense anymore. You see it for what it is. Awareness is not cold. It's not detached. It's deeply compassionate. But that compassion now includes yourself. When the avoidant creates distance, the super empath doesn't go into self-blame or emotional bargaining. They lean on what they know. They've seen this pattern before. And this time they choose differently. They don't confuse mixed signals with intimacy. They don't confuse longing with love. They step back, not to punish, but to protect. Because when you're awake in your own story, you stop falling into other people's emotional chaos. You meet avoidance not with fear, but with quiet knowing. Clarity is the super empath's secret. Where the avoidant often thrives in emotional ambiguity, sending mixed signals, giving just enough to keep someone invested while never fully committing, the super empath doesn't stay confused. They ask the hard questions. They don't pretend not to notice the distance. And most importantly, they don't settle for crumbs disguised as complexity. Clarity, for them, isn't about control. It's about peace. It's about being able to rest in the truth of what is, even if that truth is uncomfortable. In relationships with avoidant partners, confusion becomes the norm. One day it's closeness, vulnerability, connection. The next, coldness, withdrawal, and aloofness. This hot and cold cycle can become addictive to the unaware empath because the inconsistency fuels fantasy. It keeps them chasing the high of reconnection, mistaking it for love. But the super empath sees the cycle for what it is, a pattern, not passion. They understand that love should not feel like a puzzle you're endlessly trying to solve. When something feels off, the super empath doesn't ignore it. They don't gaslight themselves into believing they're overreacting. Instead, they investigate the feeling. They bring it into the light. They ask, is this situation nourishing or draining me? Do I feel seen, safe, and secure here? If the answer is no, they don't justify staying. They don't wait for the avoidant to suddenly become emotionally fluent. They make peace with the reality in front of them. Clarity also means not over-explaining yourself. The super empath doesn't feel the need to defend their emotional needs as if they're unreasonable. They know wanting consistency, affection, and connection is not too much. It's what makes a healthy relationship. And so they stop apologizing for having standards. They stop begging to be chosen. They let their honesty act as a filter. If someone can't meet them in clarity, then that person isn't ready for what they offer. Avoidants often rely on ambiguity to keep relationships non-threatening. They withhold just enough to maintain distance, yet engage just enough to keep the other person hoping. But when the super empath responds with clarity, expressing needs plainly, asking direct questions, and stating boundaries without fear, it disrupts the entire dynamic. Because suddenly, there's no room for hiding, no place for confusion to fester. In the presence of clarity, emotional games fall apart. The super empath doesn't argue, they don't chase, they don't play detective, they simply show up as themselves and let the avoidant reveal their capacity or lack thereof. Clarity brings the truth into focus, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Self-respect is the anchor that holds the super empath steady in the face of emotional unpredictability. It's what stops them from giving their heart away just because someone shows potential. While empathy makes them sensitive to the needs and pain of others, self-respect reminds them not to abandon their own. Without it, the empath gets pulled into the gravitational field of the avoidance confusion, constantly adapting, shrinking, and second-guessing themselves to maintain a fragile connection. But with self-respect, the super empath becomes unshakable. They know that love should not cost them their dignity. An avoidant partner often triggers the empath's deepest longing: to be fully accepted, chosen, and emotionally safe. But here's the hard truth. Many empaths mistake the challenge of earning love from the emotionally unavailable as proof that the connection is deep. They romanticize the struggle. They think, if I can just love them enough, maybe they'll finally open up. That mindset leads to emotional exhaustion. It teaches the empath to tolerate uncertainty and label it as patience. The super empath does something radically different. They redefine love. It's no longer about proving their worth to someone who keeps them at a distance. It's about choosing people who meet them with the same openness and effort they give so freely. Self-respect makes them realize that their needs are not a burden. Their desire for consistency is not clingy. Their request for emotional safety is not unreasonable. It's standard. When faced with avoidance, the super empath doesn't try to decode it. They don't internalize it or try to out-nurture it. They don't try to impress or convince. They observe the behavior and ask, is this relationship honoring who I am? If the answer is no, they walk not out of punishment or pride, but out of protection. They've learned that loving someone who resists intimacy often leads to self-betrayal, and they're no longer willing to pay that price. Self-respect doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it only to those who treat it with care. It means drawing a clear line between compassion and compromise. The super empath doesn't confuse tolerance with love. They don't wait in limbo hoping someone will change. They don't keep watering a relationship that only grows when they're the only one doing the work. That teaches them that walking away can be an act of deeper connection to themselves. And once they've claimed that, they're no longer available for anything less. The super empath wins by not playing the game. That's the part the avoidant never sees coming. Avoidants often unconsciously create dynamics that invite the other person to chase, to prove, to perform. They pull back just enough to trigger longing, then reappear with enough charm or vulnerability to reignite hope. It's not always malicious, it's fear-driven, but still, it creates a pattern. One person gives more, one person stays guarded. And as long as the empath keeps engaging on those terms, the cycle continues. But the moment the super empath refuses to play, the game collapses. Not playing the game doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. It means being deeply rooted in your own emotional reality. It means choosing to no longer invest in someone's potential over their path. The avoidant relies on inconsistency to stay in control, but the super empath opts out of that emotional tug of war entirely. They stop being predictable in their responses. They stop showing up for every breadcrumb of affection. They stop hoping that the next emotional high will finally lead to stability. Avoidants often test people with silence, with distance, with vague words and unclear intentions. The unaware empath takes the bait. They overthink, overanalyze, overassumption. But the super empath doesn't. They recognize these tests for what they are, defense mechanisms. And instead of reacting, they observe. They don't send the long text. They don't call to clarify. They don't chase, because they know the second they start explaining themselves to someone who's emotionally absent, they've already lost their center. Winning, in this case, isn't about making the avoidant regret losing you. It's about refusing to lose yourself. The super empath stays in their lane. They keep living. They focus on what feels good, what's reciprocal, what's stable. And when the avoidant circles back, as they often do, they're met with someone who's no longer emotionally available for half commitments. Someone who's done trying to build a home in a relationship made of fog. This refusal to engage in the game isn't spiteful. It's grounded. It's the awareness that love shouldn't be a battlefield for validation. The super empath doesn't play because they've outgrown the need to earn love through struggle. They don't need to decode every silence or explain every feeling. They let go of the need to win someone over. And in doing so, they win something far greater: their peace, their power, and their emotional freedom. So here's what it all comes down to. The super empath doesn't win by chasing. They win by knowing their worth, knowing the game, and knowing when to stop playing it. They no longer confuse silence with mystery, distance with depth, or inconsistency with passion. They don't romanticize confusion. They outgrow it. And if you're listening to this thinking, that sounds like who I'm becoming, then I want to tell you something very clearly. You're not too sensitive. You're not too intense. You're not asking for too much. You're just finally seeing that your empathy isn't meant to be poured into someone who can't hold it. It's meant to be protected, directed, and shared with someone who shows up with the same clarity, consistency, and emotional availability you bring to the table. Because you teach people how to love you by how you love yourself when they don't. So to every super empath learning to stand tall in their truth, keep your heart open, but keep your standards higher. You don't need to heal them. You just need to stop hurting you. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart, and for choosing yourself a little more today. Until next time, honor your empathy, protect your peace, and never again settle for emotional breadcrumbs. You were never hard to love. They were just too afraid to receive it. Goodbye for now, and thank you.